continuing, continuing unit 11. The more units on Shmita, Leilu Nishmat, surname Danger and Simons Matifuri, and also our Zadi's Yortzeit, Shlomo Yosef ben Chaim Shmuel. The Shamas all have aliyot on this important day, first day of Shlosh Megbala. So as we said, the Mechilta says that you have to give access to the land, and the Rambam says, yeah, access to the fruit. Ramban seems to say that there's something more, something vaster, something more broad about the access to the land. Land itself becomes everyone's in a certain sense. That seems to be what the Ramban is implying. Let's see this from the Mishnah in Nedarim. The Mishnah in Nedarim says, bottom of the first page, so you're not allowed to go mudar, right? If I forbid someone from going in the neder, right? This week's parsha kind of Nazirut, Nedarim. Make a neder that you're madir someone, you ask for someone beneder to come into your land. So he's not allowed to come into your land. They're doing Shmita. He can't come into the land, but he's allowed to eat from the fruit that happens to be the overhanging fruit outside the garden. That's what the Mishnah says. So during Shmita, it seems that what he's allowed to do is only eat the fruit. He has no access to the land. Why? Because it's my land. I could madir hana'ah.
No access to the fruit on the other side of the fence.
What about the other fruit?
The other fruit.
Correct.
Not all the fruit.
Correct. So let's see the Lashon in the Gemara, top of page 2. The Gemara says, I could answer on you the access to the land or as much as I want, but top of page 2, I could answer the access to my land as much as I want, but the maise, the fruit is hefker. We're gonna get back to this line later. Is hefker, does Kadosh Baruch Hu create a hefker, or am I actively creating the hefker? We'll get back to that a bit later on the page. Ala nami afkera, also the land itself is hefker. Land itself is hefker. Seems to be right. Ala nami afkera. The Kadosh Baruch Hu is mafker the land. So my land is also hefker. So why can't they walk through my? Why can't they walk through my land? Amar ula be'umdim ilanot ala gvulim. Meaning I have no trees inside the field. We have trees on the sides. So there's no real justification to go through the land. He says it's a gzera, because if you hang out in the land, in the ground, on the grounds too much, you're overstaying your access. Right? Meaning it seems that Kadosh Baruch Hu allows the access to your land during Shmita, as long as there's fruit there. So there is some kind of interplay. On the one hand, this is just interesting in the Gemara. The Gemara starts from, why can't the karka itself is hefker? And then continues and says, well, it's kind of hefker where the fruit is. Right? So it's not
on the side of the land that you can only reach what's hanging over, probably less than 30% of the whole tree.
So it depends. Maybe you can climb the tree.
What?
Maybe you can climb the tree.
I'm just saying.
But so you see the interplay. The Ran says that from the first question in the Gemara already starts its interplay. The Ran says, right? The hefker of the land is only letzorech lekitat hapirot. It's not that the land is hefker. The land is yours. But whatever land is needed, whatever access on the grounds is necessary to reach the fruit is hefker. Right? If you have fruit that's inaccessible, so you're allowed to walk through the land. So the only justification to walk through the land, in other words, when you say, what do you own here? I can answer on you whatever is mine. What is mine? The land is mine, right? Well, not exactly, right? Because the land is only mine because the land isn't mine insofar as fruit accessibility, right? So whatever, as long as it's accessible from the outside, there's no justification to allow access.
What it means for land to be hefker. I mean, because for the owner of the land being hefker means he doesn't actually have the right to, the sole right to do anything on it. And we have all these other, scriptures from the Torah that says, you can't plow, you can't plant, you don't harvest in the commercial way and things like that. But for other people, they can't do it either. So the fact that it's hefker to the landowner doesn't really afford any significant additional rights to anybody else. They can't plant, they can't do anything else either.
You're saying you're asking, what does this question even mean? When we say there's access, so in the end, all you're saying is you're saying that this is what is called a false dichotomy. I'm presenting as if the Rambam says that it's only access to the fruit, and the Ramban is saying something more intrinsic of the land hefker. And you're saying, apart from access to the fruit, what else is there?
There's
in the end,
I mean, if there were no fruit, we would be talking about access to the land.
Let's see the difference in the Ran and the Rush, and see if we could tease something out of this. Just a second, Rav Baruch, I just want to read the last line in the Ran. Once again, as long as you need it for access. Once you achieve the access and you hang around, then it's awesome, right? So it's not the land is hefker, it's not even hefker for walking. It's only hefker for while you're achieving access to the fruit, right? Only during that. Yes, Rav Baruch. Right. So right. So that's a good question. I'm just sorry. Philip, there. Would this imply that you're allowed to? Right. Would this imply that you're allowed to walk through the land? Stam, because it's a shortcut, right? It's a sack. Yes, Rav Baruch.
There's a concept in real estate law of easement. How do you get access to something? So is this suggesting that not only are you getting access in the sense that, if I'm standing under the tree and I need to get, to the fruit, I can stand under the tree and that's okay, but it's also access to that area. And then the question is, how is that defined? Is it the shortest route? Is it the least bumpy route? Is it only if it's close to the gvul?
Right. So it says here, it's a good question. First of all, thank you, because as you were saying, I quickly Googled the easement. I was not aware of this concept. A right to cross or otherwise use someone else's land for a specified purpose. This is wonderful concept for whenever I'm going to have to translate easement. Easement. It's spelled the way you think it's spelled.
The reason why somebody will not let somebody. The reason why a landowner will not let somebody use their land to get to the other, as a easement, it's because if you allow that, then you can get in the U.S. a permanent right to it. Yeah, because we always cut through the. But
right. No. So easement again. Easement is kinyan. No. Easement is what we call in halacha kinyan tashmishin. Right, where the ownership is specified for a specific use. Right. Kinyan tashmishin, maybe kinyan perot, if you define perot in a certain way. Because perot doesn't necessarily mean. Perot means certain fruit, and there's certain advantages that I have. That's not necessarily fruit, literally apples, right? So here the kinyan, so right. So l'chora, what Rav Baruch was saying is correct, that, and those I also base it. I thought I saw it here, but I guess it's not precise enough. When Reb Shimon Bar Yakim says shemesh hebe amidah, you can also say gzeira, maybe he'll walk the longer way. Right? By the same token, just like you can't hang around. You've reached the tree. You took your apricots. What do you do now? You have to leave right away, right? You should leave right away. Sorry, something's bothering me here. There you go. Right, you have to leave right away because it's not your land, right? It's not because you're a mudar bana, or because you're a mudar na.
If there was a dead tree on the land, would you be able to take the wood?
Right, so there's no kedushat shvit in wood, right?
Yeah.
Firewood. So chora, right? So let's see. You're right. L'chora no, right? And it's not right. It's not hefker. Let's see the Rosh. The Rosh says בעומדים על הגבולין ואינו צריך להיכנס לתוך השדה ואפשר לכל אדם אינו להיכנס כיוון שיכול לקחת פירות. The Rosh says, wait, hold on. Let's think about this. Let's go back to the Mishnah and the Gemara. The Rosh says, I don't understand. The Mishnah says, if I'm mudar na, question, before forget everything else. Next year, can I just walk into Glenn's garden? Stam? Or not, right? Why should I be allowed to? Right? Why should I be allowed to? All right. This year, if he has apples there, I could go in and take the apples, and I have to leave right away, right? And if he has an apple tree standing on the, like by the sidewalk, and all the apples are accessible from the sidewalk, you have the right to walk through the garden. The no, right? The no. The Mishnah says if you're mudar hana'ah, then you can't go into the garden. Ula says we're talking about the apples that are accessible from the street. Let's say, wait, hold on. The Rosh says, hold on. I don't understand. Forget Shmita. Forget mudar hana'ah. Not forget Shmita. Forget mudar hana'ah. Even if I'm not mudar hana'ah, I'm not allowed to walk into your garden if there's no justification. See the problem? If you're mudar hana'ah and the apple is accessible from the street, then you're allowed to go into the garden. And if you're not mudar hana'ah, you're allowed to go into the garden. Why? The apples are accessible from the street anyway. So Ula Zukim, that doesn't make sense. Right? Good. Glad you're convinced. So it says the Rosh, two options. You're right. It's not only mudar hana'ah. Really, it's anyone. Mudar hana'ah just has to bring korban if he doesn't. Because he goes against the Quran. But you're right. And everyone is not. No one is allowed to go into the garden in such circumstances. But if you're mudar hana'ah, you'll also bring a korban because you're over on the nether, right? Shema. Interesting, right? The Rosh says other people are allowed to walk into the garden. Why? Why?
That does something.
Exactly. Can I repeat your thing for the camera? Shmita does something. Did I do it right?
It's something.
Right. We can't ignore the interplay between the land and the fruit on the one hand. On the other hand, the Rosh says, just because it's a good question in the Gemara, right? If really no one is allowed to go into the garden, if the fruit is on the sidewalk, or it is accessible from the sidewalk. So what's the Gemara say? What's the chiddush in the Mishnah? Right. So he says, must be that everyone else is allowed to go in. Must be. Why? So still, now again, what happens if there are no trees there? If there's no fruit at all, are you allowed to go into the garden? Or not, right? It's hard to ignore the interplay. So what is it? Maybe it's more easily accessible from the garden. Or maybe we say like this. Since the apples are accessible from the garden, you're allowed to go into the garden to get them. They're also accessible from the street. So what? See what I did there? There's the existence of the fruit allows anyone access to the fruit any way they want. Now, if you're mudar hana'ah, you don't get any way you want because there's still that interplay. Which raises the Avnei Miluim's question, how does this work exactly? The Avnei Miluim asks, I'm going to, very, very annoying halacha. People don't believe me until Then we open the books and say, "Wow, it's amazing." Let's say I own an apartment and I rent it to Glenn, and then I say, "Glenn, you're getting on my nerves. I want you to have no hana from anything of mine." So, Khalila, if I'd say such a thing, right? Or I'd specifically say konam on that apartment on you. Can I do that? Am I able to aster the apartment I rented out to you on you? Does that work? What do you think? Right? Oh, you would say no.
I mean, if you've already written.
The Shulchan Aruch says yes. Why?
Written a contract, it's already that Torah valid contract, and can you actually go against your previous promise?
So the answer is this. The answer is as follows. When I rented out to you, I only gave you the kinyan perot. I only allowed you the use of the apartment. It's not yours. I still own the apartment, and I rent and I give the use to you, right? But my ownership of the apartment allows me to say that the apartment is us. I could materially sue him on the apartment because it's still mine. Ah, yes, I'd have to pay penalty, correct? Yeah. I pay penalty as well, probably, depending on the situation, whatever. But it works.
But if Steve goes in the apartment, who's over the neighbor?
Sorry?
Nobody's over the Israel if he goes into it, no?
No, why? He's over on this here.
Why is he over in the apartment, the other one?
That's asking about all kodemot. How can one person answer on the other? How can I answer my things on you, bekunam? So Shiloh. So that's a broad sugi in a darim. It's not specifically. It's about if I just have an apple here and I say kunam this apple. So how does that work? So it's no different. What's interesting here is that I rented it out to you and still. So let's compare this for a moment. Hold on. You have the use. You own the use of my apartment, right? I own the apartment. I'm able to answer it on you, right? All right. What happens on Shmita? Could you answer the use of the land on me? The Gemara says you can't, right? Rahmana afkare. We saw. The Gemara says, how can he answer it on him? He can't. Now, so the Avnei Miluim says, wait, why can't he? Hold on. Even if you have rights to the land, I can still answer it on you. No?
Nothing to do with having rights to the land. The land, other people have rights to land because you don't own it.
The part that I don't own.
It's hefker.
What do I not own? L'chora, I thought, let's ask this. Do you own that? No, hold on. Do you own the land on Shmita? Do you own my land? Pay attention. Do you own my land on Shmita more than you own my land when you rented it from me? Where do you own it more? Where do you own it more?
If you put a book down on the table and you say this is hefker,
Right? On Shmita, you own it more? I own land. I have two cases. Again, I have two situations. One is my garden at home. I have an apple tree. So I have an apple tree. So you have rights to my land right now because I have apples on the apple tree. Well, they're not right, but right. Okay, rights of access. So the specific right in the land, rights of access. So I go. Now, apart from that, I rented an apartment to you. Which do you own more? Where's your ownership stronger? More in the land you rented, or your rights of access to the apple? The renter, the person who rented it from me. I'm talking both. I own two houses. I own two houses. One I live in and have an apple tree, and another I own and I'm renting to Glenn. So now
you have more, but you have more.
No, Glenn. We don't talk about me. We talk about Glenn. That's what we do. Right?
I don't understand why we have to talk about Shmita. If you took a book and you made it hefker, could you make it usher to me?
No, we're not talking about the book. I'm not talking about the apples. But I'm not talking about the apples. I'm talking about the land.
I'm talking about the land. You make it you take a book, your book, and you say this
very good. Okay.
You make it usher to me. No.
Excellent. No, excellent. So this is very good, very good. So very good. So really, what's the ktsot? That's the ktsot's mistake. That's the ktsot. That's the ktsot. The ktsot. I just want to explain what happened. The ktsot. We just said the ktsot, and then the Rav Baruch Frankel. So I'll say what do they say? The ktsot is looking at Glenn's ownership, right? I don't know why I turned you into the renter, but I'm sorry, you're just here. So very right. The ktsot is looking at Glenn's ownership and says Glenn more owns what he rented and paid for than this God-given right of walking through my land, right? Glenn owns that more than that. So how do I have the ability to aser the apartment he paid for? I don't have the ability to aser my garden, right? That's because Baruch Hu said you can walk and get the fruit. So the Baruch Frankel says, no. The question is not Glenn, the question is me. Which one do I own more? Right? Sorry? The one I'm renting out, right? The one I'm renting out, I really own. But the access to the Shmita fruit, I don't own at all. Rachmana hefker, right? As you're saying, right? Yeah, only the access, yeah. The easement, as Rav Baruch called it, right? The excellent question. Let's get to that. Let's go. And Baya, see the Mishnah on page 3. So first of all, this is an interesting machloket. Let's just read the Rav Baruch Frankel first, top of page 3, and then we'll jump to the middle of page 3 where Philip is taking us. It says the sorry, Rav Frankel wrote on Davnei Miluim. לענד יש לחלק, דעתם כתיב כי לי כל הארץ. רחמנא הפקרי גוף הקרקע ללקיטת הפירות, זה עדיף מסחירות שהגוף שלו משכיר בין הסוחר לשעבוד. מה שאין כן בשביעית, נתנה התורה גוף הקרקע לצורך לקטת הפירות. ואין הבעלים בהם משעה הזו כלום. But he takes it one step further. He says, in סחירות I'm giving you only the rights of access. שמיטה נתנה התורה גוף הקרקע לצורך לקטת הפירות. You see why I keep on calling it ownership, Dr. Vorlowitz? Because he could have said, you have rights as opposed to I have rights, right? But it's not what he says. He says, you really own it. Why? Because when the Torah says, Kili kol haaretz, the Torah is not only giving you something, I'll explain why. Hold on, I want to explain why. Correct. Right. Who owns it? So he wants to say Kili kol haaretz, and therefore lachem lo ochla. So who owns it? Lachem, meaning the collective own it. That's what he wants to say. I agree. That's what. You see, he says that not Torah gufakarka.
Can you sell the land in?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not exactly.
What? But the rights of access still remain by everyone, right?
Yeah, doesn't matter. The rights of access. Nothing to do with me.
Right. No, I
don't claim ownership in any way.
I agree. I just wanted to show that Rav Baruch Frankel takes an extra step. That's hard to ignore. Meaning, right, what I said before was the easier answer that Rav Baruch Frankel does not say, which is the question is how much do I own, right? Okay. Interesting. Okay. Rav Baruch Frankel could have left it at. Rav Baruch Frankel could have left it at. What do I own? In the case of the apartment, I own the apartment even after I rented it out. As opposed to in the case of Shmita, I don't have ownership or control over the access to the fruit. Right? Right. That's what he should have said. But see, in the Lashon, he said an extra step. I agree with you. That would have been a more elegant answer, right? Because here he's starting to bestow ownership to other people who owns it exactly? The collective, everyone together, right? You have to say something like that, otherwise, right?
Restoring access rights doesn't mean no ownership.
But that's what, but he says I agree. It's saying there are three steps that could have gone here. The first step could have been just forget the beneficiaries. Just in terms of the owner, right? The chiluk works on the owner's end. Forget the beneficiaries, right? I own the apartment, but I don't own the access. So who owns the access? Whoever grabs it, right? That's what Dr. Rolitz wants to say. It's hefker. Whoever grabs it. That's one level. The next level is to say that no, we're talking. It's beyond that. Everyone also has that right. The third level is to say it's not only a right; it's also an ownership. Gufa kalka. I don't know why he has to say that, but it's just. All right. Beseder. So why call it gufa kalka? Why not say zchut alicha? Frankly, it's not. You know what I'm saying? It's not some early Rishon who doesn't have. Frankly, has very good Hebrew. It's quite precise. You know what I'm saying? It's not a Rishon who's like playing with, and you say, "Wow, I didn't really mean." Tov, says the Mishnah. Philip's point. Meaning, the poor are allowed to go into the garden after the. So the Rash explains. Rash Mishan says that at the beginning of the following year, that's when you really pick the produce, and therefore the poor people could go pick like a chechafea. But the Rambam explains we're also talking about Shmita. So there when the second rain comes, whatever that, it's not exactly the second rain, let's just call it the second rain for argument's sake, for sake of discussion. When the second rain comes, then you can no longer come to the garden, come to people's lands to pick up the Shemitah fruit. Right? Says the Chazon Ish, so that means, yeah, let's think this through. Hold on. What's the latest fruit we have? Oranges, right? Oranges are very good, right? Right. So oranges are fairly late. Let's say the second rain came and the oranges are still on the trees. Megid, yeah, right? The oranges are still on the trees. So l'chora, why does the Mishnah Bichlal stop anyone and the poor people from coming? So the poor can pick until the Rivia Shnia. So you can say, well, at that point we're worried about the new fruit. So just say till the new fruit, well, as long as the new fruit is still there, how does that work? So the Chazon Ish.
So we're discussing whether we can actually, whether what we're allowed to pick is based on the fruit being Shmita, or whether we're allowed to be based on the land being Shmita. Otherwise,
very good. That's what Rav Kanevsky is going to say.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I know. Great minds. Yeah. Says Chazon Ish. לעיין, כיוון דרכון ההפקרה לשדה הוא בא לפייג' 3. איך רשאי לזורע ולמנוע רגלם של בני אדם משם? למה לא יהיה כשג שדה ומשמרה? מה ישנה שמינית משביעית עצמה? שאם יניח כלים בדרך פרדסו, שאם ילכו ישברו כליו. לכך בדין שהולכים כדרכן ואנחנו חוששים. Meaning, there is another aspect. The Mishnah, the Yerushalmi on this Mishnah explains, we're concerned that the poor people are going to ruin the new planting, the planting. But it says Chazon Ish, I don't understand. Let's say you block the way. During Shmita, you have some fruit there and you put tools there to block the way. Someone's allowed to come and kick them aside, and if they hurt them, they hurt them. It's your problem. Because they have rights of access. So by what right do you in any way diminish that? By what right do you in any way diminish their right of access? You're saying, yeah, but after the second rain, you have to start taking care of your land for the next year. So that's your problem. But I still have rights of access. says the Chazon Ish, אפשר דארי באמת ומניח להן דרך להיכנס ליטול את הפירות, ועד רביעייה השנייה רשאים ללך דרך פרדסות. Meaning, this goes back to the easement that Rav Baruch mentioned earlier. You're right. During Shmita, if I make a path, it's the shortest path from the entrance to the fruit, the people are allowed to walk around it and beside it and freely. I want to get to the fruit, I can walk wherever I want in your garden to get to the fruit. After Reviyah Shniya, they can only walk through there. You have to start preparing the produce for next year, you have to start preparing the land for next year, so people have limited access. But this tells us, this informs us about the access until then. First of all, during Shmita, right? Full access, you can walk wherever you want as long as you're walking to the fruit. Right? So during Shmita and also the first couple of 3 months after Shmita, whatever, right? You'll still have full access, and after that, only the limited access, and also that is on Takana Chachamim. So people can prepare their land. That's how Chazon Ish says it. Rav Kanievsky, see the Derech Emunah on the bottom of the page. Le'anad yesh lomar, almost the bottom, page 4. לענד יש לומר שהתורה לא הפקירה הקרקע אלא בשביעית. כתוב במחילת השביעית, שמתנה ונטשתה. We said this whole discussion about being mafkir the land comes from the pasuk והשביעית שמתנה ונטשתה. Right? It says on page 5. וזה רק כתוב על שנה שביעית, שיש מצוות שמתנה ונטשתה, וזה מה שנאמר בנדרים, מהרנה מהפקרה. אבל אחרי שביעית, after when שביעית is over, נהיג'ה הפירות עדיין הפקר, וזה אחר הכנתה, אבל הקרקע אינו הפקר. יכולים לספרות לביתו, לחכה לעניים. Meaning, during the 7th year, you have to mafkir the land. What happens in the 8th year? You still have fruit. So what do you do? Then you can do the other option, the mechilta. You remember the mechilta we started with. The mechilta said a person can say, I'll pick the fruit and put it in front of the and put it in the sidewalk so people can take it from there. Nope. You have to mafkir your land. Comes the 8th year, says Rav Kanievsky, then you pick the fruit and then you have the right to pick the fruit and put it in front of your house.
Doesn't sound like access.
Why?
It doesn't sound like access.
No, that's when you lose. 8th year, there isn't access. 7th year, they have they have access to the fruit. Not full, again, Chazon Ish said 7th year full access, 8th year limited access. Rav Kanievsky says 7th year access, doesn't specify. It seems to be the limited access. 8th year, you don't have access at all.
But 7th year that we would want to limit access for something like oranges because we don't want anybody to pick the fruit early and destroy it, so that
No, but again, you're talking about when to pick the fruit. I'm talking about once you say, okay, the fruit is ripe. Right, once the fruit is ripe, open the gates. You're not to pick the fruit early. You're not allowed. Look at the first makor on the page. First makor of the page. First source on the page. It says it right there. But Rafi is disturbed. Why? I'll tell you why. Because the Mishnah says until the next second rain, so he can walk around till November, right? So why are you saying 7th and 8th year? Right? L'chora. Something in the throat. Why? L'chora, the 7th year you should have full access, and 8th year you have no access from Rosh Hashanah. Why do you have till November? Says Rav Kanievsky of Big Chidush that this is bichlal a different din. There's a thing called midat sdom. So there, miot tov al tikri ra, midat sdom. If I have something of yours by me and it doesn't harm me in any way whatsoever, and I'm not allowed to be davkanik. You have to be a davkanik. You have to say, no, I don't want you to walk through my garden. Why? Because I don't want you to. So there, you can choose to do that. But I don't need to ask permission if I know someone's stopped doing a davkanik. That's why if there's fruit there and it's not harming anything, I can go pick the fruit. So that's the whole story. Meaning, during the 7th year, you have access. Why? Because Hashem gave it. The 8th year until there is a price to pay is access. Why? Because you're not to be davkanik. Nothing to do with Shmita per se. The Chal derived from the general din in Bavakama, that you're not to be a davkanik. And so why only till the second rain? Because then you start preparing your land. You're not allowed. Then it's not being a davkanik. Then it makes sense. So again, the Chazon Ish says that
if you don't need the land, then you have to, what do you have to give right? Or does it not look?
Right. L'chor, generally speaking, you'd say lo plug. Yeah. But it's a fair point. Oh no, but I said there's a big chidush here because he's saying there's nothing with Shmita. It's totally different, right? So again, to sum that up, according to Rav Kanievsky, there are 3 tkufot, right? There's the during Shemitah Hashem bestows it on you till Rav Yashniya. It's just don't be a davkanik, and after that you're not being a davkanik. But already from Rosh Hashanah, you didn't really have true right to the access to the land. Chazon Ish says differently. It says during Shemitah you have full access. Shminit you have limited access. Question: why did, according to Chazon Ish, also the cutoff line is November-ish and not Rosh Hashanah, right? Why is that? So I think it has to do with the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. See the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. Yudbet Amar Avasi Amar B'Yochanan Umat Ba Mishmei D'Rabbi Yotzei Grudi Amar Ka Miket Sheva Shanim B'Moed Shnas HaShmita B'Chag HaSukkot. So the Sukkot right after Shmita. Is that part of Shmita or not? Or it's not. The Gemara says it teaches you. You remember a long time ago we learned Tosefet Shvi'it, right? Unit number 2, Tosefet Shvi'it, that the Shemitah really runs into the 8th year. It doesn't really end in the 7th year, because the Shemitah year really is an agricultural, and therefore it ends. So when you say Shnat Shemitah, we mean till Rav Yashniya, not because the fruit is there, because that's the year, right? Because we look at the agricultural year, not at the calendarial year.